And I make up the hour. Well, welcome in everybody, and welcome back to Torrid Tuesdays. I shall address this immediately, as it is somewhat controversial today. We do have someone to thank, and while I appreciate all of you equally, Lamp is quite insistent that this is a merit-based system. So, congratulations to Abbe for your 26th first. Let's see if we go to the void today, as I mark it. Seems not. And once again, condolences to Plague. I do see you trying and I appreciate it. But I do not have any say over this. This is one of Lamp's little systems. And Abbe is very firmly Lamp's favourite. Though I love all of you evenly, of course. Now, we have no new books today, nor followers to thank, nor badges. Though soon there will be a Torrid Tuesday badge. I have it in mind, but I will save it for the last reading. And we still have probably 2 or 3 more of Emma before we're at its end. I've also been very explicitly disallowed from going down to the bad book today. Lamp says I'm not allowed to do it at all on Tuesdays, and much as I might feel like defying him, this time I think I will obey, if only for once. That being said, let us move somewhere more practical and prepare for things to be a little bit more intimate. There we are. Now, the tone is set, and the small piece of unpleasantness and pleasantness, of course, is out of the way. Let us begin with today's reading, shall we? As usual, we have poetry first, and we are continuing on with Thomas Hardy, for while it is a sad series of poems, you can tell that in each and every one there is so profound a love that I cannot say it does not fit our Torrid Tuesdays. Love is not always a happy thing, but it is always worthwhile. So to begin with, a dream or no? Why go to Saint Julio? Was Julio to me some strange necromancy that charmed me to fancy that much of my life claims the spot as its key? Yes, I have had dreams of that place in the west, and a maiden abiding, threat as in hiding, fair-eyed and white-shouldered, broad-bowed and brown-tressed, and of how coastward bound on a night long ago, there lonely I found her, the sea-birds around her, and other than nigh things uncaring to know. So sweet her life there, in my thought it has seemed, that quickly she drew me to take her unto me, and lodge her long years with me, such I have dreamed. But naught of that maid from Saint Julot I see. Can she ever have been here, and shed her life's sheen here, the woman I thought a long housemate with me? Does there even a place like Saint Julot exist, or a Valençay valley with stream and leafed alley, or Beanie or Boss with its flounce flinging mist? Next, we have After a Journey. Here too I come to view a voiceless ghost. Whither, oh whither will its whim now draw me? Up the cliff, down, till I'm lonely, lost, and the unseen water's ejaculations o'er me. Where you will next be, there's no knowing, facing round about me everywhere, with your nut-coloured hair and grey eyes and rose flush coming and going. Yes, I have re-entered your olden haunts at last. Through the years, through the dead scenes I have tracked you. What have you now found to say of our past, scanned across the dark space wherein I have lacked you? Summer gave us sweets, but autumn wrought division. Things were not lastly as firstly well. With us twain you tell, but all's closed now, despite time's derision. I see what you are doing. You are leading me on to the spots we knew when we haunted here together. The waterfall above which the mist boughs shone, at the then fair hour and the then fair weather, and the cave just under with a voice still so hollow, that seems to call out to me from 40 years ago, when you were all aglow, and not the thin ghost that I now frailly follow. Ignorant of what there is flitting here to see, the walked birds preen and the sea flop is lazy. Soon you will have, dear, to vanish from me, and the stars close their shutters in the drawn curtains hazily. Trust me, I mind not, though life lowers, the bringing me here, and they bring me here again. I am just the same as when our days were joy, and our paths through flowers to Pentargon Bay. On then to our next, a death day recalled. Beanie did not quiver, Julio grew not grey, the Invalency's river held its wonted way, or seemed not to utter, dimmest note of dirge, Targon mouth a mutter to its creamy surge. Yet though these unheeding, listless passed the hour, of her spirit speeding, she had in her flowers sought and loved the places, much and often pine, with their lonely faces when in towns confined. Why did not Valency and his pearl deplore one whose horns were whence he drew his limpid store? Why did Boss not thunder, Targon apprehend, body and breath were sunder of their former friend? Next we have Beanie Cliff, written from March 1870 to March 1913. 1. Oh, the opal and the sapphire of that wandering western sea, and the woman riding high above with bright hair flapping free, the woman whom I loved so and who loyally loved me. 2. The pale muse plain below us, and the waves seemed far away, in a nether sky engrossed in saying their ceaseless babbling say, and we laughed light-hearted aloft on that clear sun-marched day. 3. A little cloud then cloaked us, and there flew an irised rain, and the Atlantic dyed its levels with a dull, misfeatured stain, and then the sun burst out again, and purples prinked the main. 4. Still in all its chasmal beauty bulks old Beanie to the sky, and shall she and I not go there once again now March is nigh? And the sweet things said of that March say anew there by and by. 5. What if still in chasmal beauty looms that wild, weird western shore? A woman now is elsewhere, with the ambling pony bore, and nor knows nor cares for Beanie, and will laugh there nevermore. And the next, and the last that we shall have today, at Castle Botterell. As I drive to the junction of lane and highway, and the drizzle bedrenches the wagonette, I look behind at the fading byway, and see in the slope now glistening wet, distinctly yet, myself and a girlish form benighted. In dry March weather we climbed the road, beside a chaise we had just alighted, to ease the sturdy pony's load, when he sighed and slowed. What we did as we climbed, and what we talked of, matters not much, nor to what it led, something that life will not be balked of, without rude reason, till hope is dead, and feeling fled. It filled but a minute, but was there ever a time of such quality since or before? In that hill story, to one mind, never, though it had been climbed foot swift, footsore by thousands more. Primeval rocks form the road's steep border, and much have they faced there, first and last, of the transitory in earth's long order, but what they record in colour and cast is that we too passed. And to me, though time's unflinching rigour in mindless rote has ruled from sight, the substance now, one phantom figure, remains on the slope as when that night soars a light. I look and see it there, shrinking, shrinking. I look back at it amid the rain, for the very last time, for my sand is sinking, and I shall traverse old love's domain, never again. And with that last of the poetry, so too comes another of our company. I welcome you in, Wild, and I do appreciate your being here. And in my eager rush to begin the poetry, I realise I've quite forgotten something. I wanted to mention something to you. Not something for today, or something pressing, but something that I would like you to think over. You who listen and attend these Torrid Tuesdays. Emma is not yet finished. 2 or 3 more readings, I think, until the end. But when she is, I would ask you, what story would you have next? To that end, I have a few options for you. The first, already upon our shelf here, we have Chérie by Colette. So too we have Tender is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Both of these already in the library. Nearby, and certain that I can take possession of them, I have also North Grange Abbey, again by Jane Austen, a book called Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Of these 5, I do wonder if there's any of you would prefer. And while I do not ask for an answer today, in time we will need to choose, so I ask you to give it some consideration. Now that we are all assembled, and before all are scattered to the wind. But time grows onwards, and we have only so much for reading. So let me have a swallow of water, and we shall begin our little ritual. But yes, you are right, Abbe, I've forgotten myself. Thank you, Wild, for stopping by. I do hope you have an enjoyable luck, and safe travels. Now then, as always, when we are reading like this, if at any point you should by some means miss something that has been said, either due to poor diction, to technical faults, to distraction, or for any other reason, I implore you do not hesitate to ask me to repeat, for I would hate for you to miss any that is said. If at any moment you have questions, thoughts, or comments, feel free to make them. I shall answer either directly or at chapter's end. If you have redeems you wish to fulfill, feel free. If you wish not to interrupt the story, then between chapters, or indeed now, as I do my little spiel, is a good time. And do remember, if you're saving up for that 5,000 point Hold Me Close redeem, and today it is the same price as the 500 point. It is a wise time to spend. To all these things I ask, you take freely and indulge. This is a safe space for you to do so. But now I shall have one more drink of water. Give time for anyone who wishes to indulge in such redeems. And I drink to your health as I do so. Well, I congratulate you then, Wills, on the new change of name. But my having said this, and allowing it to go on. And assuming now that none have a redeem they wish to indulge in, or a question they wish to ask, then that being the case, without any further ado, if you are all sitting comfortably, then I shall begin. Oh no, I shan't. Look there, Abbe, a 75-string string. 3/4 of 100. Remarkable. Truly and genuinely remarkable. I cannot express, in words, nor pure in my voice, quite how grateful I am. But I want you to know that I am so meaningfully thankful. Your persistence and regularity in attending us here. It means more than I can possibly express to you. But now then, much as I would dwell on that moment for long minutes or even hours, as it truly deserves, instead we must press onwards, but time is limited. So let us move on then, and return once more to Emma. Chapter 36. I hope I shall soon have the pleasure of introducing my son to you, said Mr. Weston. Mrs. Elton, very willing to suppose a particular compliment intended to her by such a hope, smiled most graciously. You have heard of a certain Frank Churchill, I presume, he continued, and know him to be my son, for he does not bear my name. Oh yes, I shall be very happy to make in his acquaintance. I am sure Mr. Upton will lose no time in calling on him, and we shall both have great pleasure in seeing him at the vicarage. You are very obliging. Frank will be extremely happy, I am sure. He is to be in town next week, if not sooner. We have notice of it in a letter today. I met the letter in my way this morning, and seeing my son's hand, presumed to open it. Though it was not directed to me, it was to Mrs. Weston. She is his principal correspondent, I assure you. I hardly ever get a letter. And so you absolutely opened what was directed to her? Oh, Mr. Weston, laughing affectedly, I must protest against that. A most dangerous precedent indeed. I beg you will not let your neighbours follow your example. Upon my word, if this is what I am to expect, we married women must begin to exert ourselves. Oh, Mr. Weston, I could not have believed it of you. Aye, we men are sad fellows. You must take care of yourself, Mrs. Elton. This letter tells us. It is a short letter, written in a hurry merely to give us notice. It tells us that they are all coming up to town directly, on Mrs. Churchill's account. She has not been well the whole winter, and thinks Enscombe too cold for her, so they are all to move southward without loss of time. Indeed. From Yorkshire, I think. Enscombe is in Yorkshire? Yes, they are about 190 miles from London. A considerable journey. Yes, upon my word, very considerable. 65 miles further than from Maple Groves to London. What is distance, Mr. Weston, to people of large fortune? You'd be amazed to hear how my brother, Mr. Suckling, sometimes flies about. You will hardly believe me, but twice in 1 week he and Mrs. Bragg went to London, and back again with 4 horses. The evil of the distance from Enscombe, said Mr. Weston, is that Mrs. Churchill, as we understand, has not been able to leave the sofa for a week together. In Frank's last letter she complained, he said, of being too weak to get into her conservatory without having both his arms and his uncle's. This, you know, speaks a great degree of weakness, but now she is so impatient to be in town that she means to sleep only 2 nights on the road. So Frank writes word. Certainly delicate ladies have very extraordinary constitutions, Mrs. Elton. You must grant me that. No, indeed, I shall grant you nothing. I always take the part of my own sex. I do indeed. I give you notice. You will find me a formidable antagonist on that point. I always stand up for women, and I assure you, if you knew how Selina feels with respect to sleeping at an inn, you would not wonder at Miss Churchill's making incredible exertions to avoid it. Selina says it is quite a horror to her, and I believe I have caught a little of her nicety. She always travels with her own sheets, an excellent precaution. Does Mrs. Churchill do the same? Mr. Elton interposed with, Oh, sorry. My apologies, I missed something there. Depend upon it, Miss Churchill does everything that any other fine lady ever did. Mrs. Churchill will not be second to any lady in the land, for Mrs. Elton eagerly interposed with, Oh, Mr. Weston, do not mistake me. Selina is no fine lady, I assure you. Do not run away with such an idea. Is not she? Then she is no rule for Mrs. Churchill, who is as thorough a fine lady as anybody ever beheld. Mrs. Elton began to think she had been wrong in disclaiming so warmly. It was by no means her object to have it believed that her sister was not a fine lady. Perhaps there was want of spirit in the pretence of it, and she was considering in what way she had best retract, when Mr. Weston went on. Mrs. Churchill is not much in my good graces, as you may suspect, but this is quite between ourselves. She is very fond of Frank, and therefore I would not speak ill of her. Besides, she is out of health now, but that, indeed, by her own account, she has always been. I would not say to everybody, Mrs. Elton, but I have not much faith in Mrs. Churchill's illness. If she is really ill, why not go to Bath, Mr. Weston? To Bath or to Clifton? She has taken it into her head that Enscombe is too cold for her. That fact, I suppose, that she is tired of Enscombe. She has now been a longer time stationary there than she ever was before, and she begins to want change. It is a retired place, a fine place, but very retired. Aye, like Maple Grove, I dare say. Nothing can stand more retired from the road than Maple Grove. Such an immense plantation all around it. You seem shut out from everything, in the most complete retirement, and Mrs. Churchill probably has not health or spirits like Selina to enjoy that sort of seclusion. Or perhaps she may not have resources enough in herself to be qualified for a country life. I always say a woman cannot have too many resources, and I feel very thankful that I have so many myself, as to be quite independent of society. Frank was here in February for a fortnight, so I remember to have heard. You will find an addition to the society of Highurry when he comes again. That is, if I may presume to call myself an addition. But perhaps he may never have heard of there being such a creature in the world. This was too loud a call for a compliment to be passed by, and Mr. Weston, with a very good grace, immediately exclaimed, My dear madam, nobody but yourself could imagine such a thing possible. Not heard of you. I believe Mrs. Weston's letters lately have been full of very little else than Mrs. Elton. He had done his duty and could return to his son. When Frank left us, he continued, it was quite uncertain when we might see him again, which makes this day's news doubly welcome. It has been completely unexpected, that is, I always had a strong persuasion he would be here again soon. I was sure something favourable would turn up, but nobody believed me. He and Mrs. Weston were both dreadfully desponding. How could he have contrived to come, and how could it be supposed that his uncle and aunt would spare him again, and so forth. I always felt that something would happen in our favour, and so it has, you see. I have observed, Mrs. Elton, in the course of my life, that if things are not going untowards 1 month, they are sure to mend the next. Very true, Mr. Weston, perfectly true. It is just what I used to say to a certain gentleman in company in the days of courtship when, because things did not go quite right, did not proceed with all the rapidity which suited his feelings, he was apt to be in despair, and exclaimed that he was sure at this rate it would be May before Hyman's saffron robe would be put on for us. Oh, the pains I have been at to dispel those gloomy ideas and give him cheerful views. A carriage, We had disappointments about the carriage. One morning, I remember, he came to me in such despair. She was stopped by a slight fit of coughing, and Mr. Weston instantly seized the opportunity of going on. You were mentioning May. May is the very month which... Ah, Les, welcome in. Are you not familiar with our Torrid Tuesdays? But of course you were here for the very first. Those early days in which I was reading fan fiction, I decided did not quite fit the tone of things. And so now on Tuesday, we do readings of romantic novels. At this point we're doing Jane Austen, or sorry, Emma by Jane Austen, I should say. And I tend to do so a little bit closer to the microphone, and in slightly more ambience than usual. But I assure you, I'm trying to seduce you no more than I usually am. You may take that as you will. But I do welcome you in, and thank you for joining us. Ah, yes. You are all far too kind. But please, I must implore you, do not forget. In among our number is the humble rat-fucker 14. Do not put them out of work. But still, I must press on. I fear there is too much context to give you the full picture, Les. But the large points are that there is a young man by the name of Frank Churchill who is coming to the town of Highurry, where we set our tale, and who is a notable figure and the son of a Mr Weston who is there. Our main character, Emma, has some small feelings for him, though she does not think herself in love. And recently the vicar, Mr Elton, has married, and his new wife, with something of the nouveau riche, is making her impressions upon the town and being judged, which is what we're in the heart of at the moment. But where were we? Ah, yes. You were mentioning May. May is the very month that Mrs Churchill is ordered, or has ordered herself, to spend some warmer place than Enscombe, in short, to spend in London, so that we have the agreeable prospect of frequent visits from Frank. The whole spring, precisely the season of the year which one should have chosen for it. Days almost at the longest, weather genial and pleasant, always inviting one out, and never too hot for exercise. When he was here before, we made the best of it. There was a good deal of wet, damp, cheerless weather. There always is in February, you know, and we could not do half that we intended. Now will be the time. This will be complete enjoyment. And I do not know, Miss Elton, whether the uncertainty of our meeting, the sort of constant expectation there will be of his coming in today or tomorrow, and at any hour, may not be more friendly to happiness than having him actually in the house. I think it is so. I think it is the state of mind which gives most spirit and delight. I hope you will be pleased with my son, but you must not expect a prodigy. He is generally thought a fine young man, but do not expect a prodigy. Mrs Weston's partiality for him is very great, and, as you may suppose, most gratifying to me. She thinks nobody equal to him. And I assure you, Mr Weston, I have very little doubt that my opinion will be decidedly in his favour. I have heard so much in praise of Mr Frank Churchill. At the same time, it is fair to observe that I am one of those who always judge for themselves, and are by no means implicitly guided by others. I give you notice that as I find your son, so shall I judge of him. I am no flatterer. Mr Weston was musing. I hope, he said presently, I have not been severe upon poor Mrs Churchill. If she is ill, I should be sorry to do her injustice. There are some traits in her character which make it difficult for me to speak of her with the forbearance I could wish. You cannot be ignorant, Mrs Elton, of my connection with her family, nor the treatment I have met with, and between ourselves, the whole blame of it is to be laid to her. She was the instigator. Frank's mother would never have been slighted as she was but for her. Mr. Churchill has pride, but his pride is nothing to his wife's. He is a quiet, indolent, gentleman-like sort of pride that would harm nobody, and only make himself a little helpless and tiresome. But her pride is arrogance and insolence, and what inclines one less to bear. She has no fair pretence of family or blood. She was nobody when he married her, barely the daughter of a gentleman. But ever since her being turned into a Churchill, she's out-Churchilled them all in high and mighty claims. But in herself, I assure you, she is an upstart. Only think. Well, that must be infinitely provoking. I have quite a horror of upstarts. Maple Grove has given me a thorough disgust to people of that sort. There is a family in the neighbourhood who are such an annoyance to my brother and sisters from the airs they give themselves. Your description of Mrs. Churchill made me think of them directly. People of the name of Tupman, very lately settled there. Lutina, welcome in. And welcome in Raiders as well. I very much thank you for swinging by. Well, welcome in, welcome in. My name is SkitterSkreetch, and as you can see, I am a small rat in a rather large library. Today we are in... well... ooh.
Lugia Splash has been bound to the library.
Thank you for the follow, Lugia Splash. And thank you for shouting out Lutina, Abbe. Varys, welcome in as well. I'm so glad to have you all. And a very happy birthday to you. Very good. Thank you for the hydrate, Lugia Splash. Your health. But yes, you all join us today during one of our Torrid Tuesday streams. We take some time to read romance novels, a little bit closer than we normally do. We're continuing today with our reading of Emma by Jane Austen, who is rather a remarkable author. Yes, of course. Do, of course, if you are in need of it, take your time. No need to stay. If you have to raid and run, I very much understand. Get a drink, have something to eat, take care of yourself. And if you have to go, be free to go, and if you would like to lurk, I'm more than happy to have you, at any rate. Oh, that's good. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I do hope you take care of yourself. And good luck with your business call. Thank you again for raiding in. Yes, but for those of you who do wish to stay, let me just catch you up a little bit. We find ourselves in the small town of Highurry, in the English countryside, where we follow the titular protagonist Emma as we interact with the small town politics of things. The most important things to know are that Emma has taken a girl, a base-born daughter of a gentleman who does not know her father, by the name of Harriet, who she hoped to wed to the local vicar, Mr Elton, who was of good stock, though somewhat below Emma socially. But he believed that Emma herself was courting him, and in the confusion there was some upset. And while Harriet is still holding a candle for him, after the unfortunate confrontation he departed, and was wed while away from Highbury. Meanwhile, Emma's governess, in fact before the novel even began, was married to a Mr Weston. And Mr Weston, who was a widower, had a son, whose family, the Churchills, were rather high up, and who took him in, as Mr Weston at the time of his wife's death was rather destitute in himself. And that young man, Mr Frank Churchill, has recently taken to visiting his father in Highbury, coming in for the first time a few weeks ago, having to depart before a large dance that he was in the process of planning could come to pass, as his mother, Mrs Churchill, was apparently taken ill. Now, there is some opinion from Mr Weston, who does not get on with her, that perhaps she was faking it to cause him to return. Now, the vicar, Mr Elton, has returned with his new wife, and she has proven herself to be a wealthy, if perhaps not as genteel as perhaps expected, woman, and has begun integrating with Highbury. Word has just come in now that Mr Churchill, Mr Frank Churchill, as well as his parents, shall be returning soon to the vicinity of Highbury and is likely to visit more. And that's where we stand at this moment, so I hope that will catch you up if you intend to stick around. And of course, if you do need to raid and run, I more than understand. I thank you all very much for coming in. And another thank you particularly to Lugia Splash for the follow and the hydrate. I do so appreciate them. Now they're pressing onwards. Only think. Well, that must be infinitely provoking. I have quite a horror of upstarts. Maple Grove has given me a thorough disgust to people of that sort. There is a family in that neighbourhood who are such an annoyance to my brother and sister, from the airs they give themselves. Your description of Mrs Churchill made me think of them directly. People of the name of Tupman, very lately settled there, and encumbered with many low connections, but giving themselves immense airs and expecting to be on footing with the old established families. A year and a half is the very utmost that they can have lived at West Hall, and how they got their fortune nobody knows. They came from Birmingham, which is not a place to promise much. You know, Mr Weston. One has not great hopes from Birmingham. I always say there is something direful in the sound. But nothing more is positively known of the Tupmans, though a good many things I can assure you are suspected. And yet by their manners they evidently think themselves equal even to my brother, Mr Suckling, who happens to be one of their nearest neighbours. It is infinitely too bad. Mr Suckling, who has been 11 years a resident at Maple Grove, and whose father had it before him, I believe at least. I am almost sure that old Mr Suckling had completed the purchase before his death. They were interrupted. Tea was carrying around, and Mr Weston, having said all that he wanted, soon took the opportunity of walking away. After tea, Mr and Mrs Weston and Mr Elton sat down with Mr Woodhouse to cards. The remaining 5 were left to their own power, and Emma doubted their getting on very well, but Mr Knightley seemed little disposed for conversation. Mrs Elton was wanting notice, which nobody had inclination to pay, and she was herself in a worry of spirits, which would have made her prefer being silent. Mr John Knightley proved more talkative than his brother. He was to leave them early the next day, and he soon began with, "Well, Emma, I do not believe I have anything more to say about the boys. But you have your sister's letter, and everything is down at full length. There we may be sure. My charge would be much more concise than hers, and probably not much in the same spirit. All that I have to recommend being comprised in, do not spoil them, and do not physic them." "I rather hope to satisfy you both," said Emma, "for I shall do all in my power to make them happy, which will be enough for Isabella, and happiness must preclude false indulgence in physic." "And if you find them troublesome, you must send them home again?" "That is very likely. You think so, do you not?" "I hope. I am aware that they may be too noisy for your father, or even may be some encumbrance to you. If your visiting engagements continue to increase as much as they have done lately." "Increase?" "Certainly. You must be sensible of that the last half year has made a great difference in your way of life." "Difference? No, indeed, I am not." "There can be no doubt of your being much more engaged with company than you used to be. Witness this very time. Here am I come down for only 1 day, and you were engaged with a dinner party. When did it happen before, or anything like it? Your neighbourhood is increasing, and you mix more with it. A little while ago, every letter to Isabella brought an account of fresh gaieties, dinners at Mr Cole's or balls at the Crown. The difference which Randall's alone makes in your goings-on is very great." "Yes," said his brother quickly. "It is Randall's that does it all." "Very well. And is Oh, no, sorry. Very well. And as Randall's, I suppose, is not likely to have less influence than heretofore. It strikes me as a possible thing, Emma, that Henry and John may be sometimes in the way, and if they are, I only beg you to send them home." "No," cried Mr Knightley, "that not need be the consequence. Let them be sent to Donwell. I shall certainly be at leisure." "Upon my word," exclaimed Emma, "you amuse me. I should like to know how many of all my numerous engagements take place without your being on the party, and why I am supposed to be in danger of wanting leisure to attend to the little boys. These amazing engagements of mine, what have they been? dining once with the Coles, and having a ball talked of which never took place. I can understand you, nodding at Mr. Knightley. Your good fortune in meeting with so many of your friends at once here delights you too much to pass unnoticed. But you, turning to Mr. Knightley, who knows how very seldom I am ever 2 hours from Hartfield, why you should foresee such a series of dissipations for me, I cannot imagine. And as to my dear little boys, I must say that if Aunt Emma has not time for them, I do not think they would fare much better with their Uncle Knightley, who is absent from home about 5 hours, where she is absent 1, and who, when he is at home, is either reading to himself or settling his accounts. Mr. Knightley seemed to be trying not to smile, and succeeded without difficulty, upon Mr. Elton's beginning to talk to him. And there comes the end of chapter 36. Well then, not too much happened there, but company is mixing, occasions are building, and we begin to see the way in which people are seeing the nature of Emma change as well as just the other people in town. I shall have my quick drink of water, and we shall press onwards. Now then, pressing directly ahead. Chapter 37. A very little quiet reflection was enough to satisfy Emma as to the nature of her agitation on hearing this news of Frank Churchill. She was soon convinced that it was not for herself she was feeling at all apprehensive or embarrassed. It was for him. Her own attachment had really subsided into a mere nothing. It was not worth thinking of. But if he, who had undoubtedly been always so much the most in love of the two, were to be returning with the same warmth of sentiment which he had taken away, it would be very distressing. If a separation of 2 months should not have cooled him, there were dangers and evils before her. Caution for him and for herself would be necessary. She did not mean to have her own affections entangled again, and it would be incumbent on her to avoid any encouragement of his. She wished she might be able to keep him from an absolute declaration. That would be so very painful a conclusion of their present acquaintance, and yet she could not help rather anticipating something decisive. She felt as if the spring would not pass without bringing a crisis, an event, as something to alter her present composed and tranquil state. It was not very long, though rather longer than Mr. Weston had foreseen, before she had the power of forming some opinion of Frank Churchill's feelings. The Enscombe family were not in town quite so soon as had been imagined, but he was at Highbury very soon afterwards. He rode down for a couple of hours. He could not yet do more, but as he came from Randalls immediately to Hartfield, she could then exercise all her quick observations, and speedily determined how he was influenced, and how she must act. They met with the utmost friendliness. There could be no doubt of his great pleasure in seeing her, but she had an almost instant doubt of his caring for her as he had done of his feelings with the same tenderness in the same degree. She watched him well. It was a clear thing he was less in love than he had last been. Absence, with the conviction probably of her indifference, had produced this very natural and very desirable effect. He was in high spirits, as ready to talk and laugh as ever, and seemed delighted to speak of his former visit, and recur to old stories. And he was not without agitation. It was not in his calmness that she read the comparative indifference. He was not calm. His spirits were evidently fluttered. There was restlessness about him. Lively as he was, it seemed a liveliness that did not satisfy himself. What decided her belief on the subject was his staying only a quarter of an hour, and hurrying away to make other calls in Highbury. He had seen a group of old acquaintances in the street as he passed. He had not stopped. He would not stop for more than a word, but he had the vanity to think they would be disappointed if he did not call, and much as he wished to stay longer at Hartfield, he must hurry off. She had no doubt of his being less in love, but neither his agitated spirits nor his hurrying away seemed like a perfect cure, and she was rather inclined to think it implied a dread of her returning power and a discreet resolution of not trusting himself with her long. This was the only visit from Frank Churchill in the course of 10 days. He was often hoping, intending to come, but was always prevented. His aunt could not bear to have him leave her. Such was his own account at Randall's. If he were quite sincere, if he really tried to come, it was to be inferred that Mrs. Churchill's removal to London had been of no service to the wilful or nervous part of her disorder. That she was really ill was very certain. He had declared himself convinced of it at Randall's. Though much might be fancy, he could not doubt, when he looked back, that she was in a weaker state of health than she had been half a year ago. He did not believe it to proceed from anything that care and medicine might not remove, or at least that she might not have many years of existence before her. But he could not be prevailed on by his father's doubts to say that her complaints were merely imaginary, or that she was as strong as ever. It soon appeared that London was not the place for her. She could not endure its noise. Her nerves were under continual irritation and suffering, and by the 10 days' end her nephew's letters to Randall's communicated a change of plan. They were going to remove immediately to Richmond. Mrs. Churchill had been recommended to the medical skill of an eminent person there, and had otherwise a fancy for the place. A ready furnished house in a favourite spot was engaged, and much benefit expected from the change. Emma heard that Frank wrote in the highest spirits of the arrangements, and seemed most fully to appreciate the blessing of having 2 months before him, with such near neighbourhood to so many dear friends. The house was taken for May and June. She was told that now he wrote with the greatest confidence of being often with them, almost as often as he could wish. Thank you kindly, Wilde. I drink to your health. Cheers. I do appreciate it. Yes, almost as often as he could wish. Emma saw how Mr. Weston understood these joyous prospects. He was considering her as the source of all the happiness they offered. She hoped it was not so. 2 months must bring it to the proof. Mr. Weston's own happiness was indisputable. He was quite delighted. It was the very circumstance he could have wished for. Now it would be really having Frank in their neighbourhood. What were 9 miles to a young man? An hour's ride? He would be always coming over. The difference in that respect of Richmond and London was enough to make the whole difference of seeing him always and seeing him never. 16 miles, nay 18, it must be a full 18 to Manchester Street, was a serious obstacle. Were he ever able to get away, the day would be spent in coming and returning. There was no comfort in having him in London. He might as well be at Enscombe. But Richmond was the very distance for easy intercourse, better than nearer. One good thing was immediately brought to certainty by this removal: the ball at the Crown. It had not been forgotten before, but had been soon acknowledged vain to attempt to fix a day. Now, however, it was absolutely to be. Every preparation was resumed, and, very soon after the Churchills had removed to Richmond, a few lines from Frank to say that his aunt felt already much better for the change, and that he had no doubt of being able to join them for 24 hours at any given time, induced them to name as early a day as possible. Mr. Weston's ball was to be a real thing. A very few tomorrows stood between the young people of Highbury and happiness. Mr. Woodhouse was resigned. The time of year lightened the evil to him. May was better for everything than February. Mrs. Bates was engaged to spend the evening at Hartfield. James had due notice, and he sanguinely hoped that neither dear little Henry nor dear little John would have anything the matter with them while dear Emma was gone. And that's the end of chapter 37. And the ball is to begin at once. All the players come to move. And we aren't very far from the ants, so I won't waste time by speculating on this chapter, but instead shall move directly onwards to the next. Chapter 38. No misfortune occurred again to prevent the ball. The day approached, the day arrived, and, after a morning of some anxious watching, Frank Churchill in all the certainty of his own self reached Randall's before dinner, and everything was safe. No second meeting had there yet been between him and Emma. The room at the Crown was to witness it, but it would be better than a common meeting in a crowd. Mr. Weston had been so very earnest in his entreaties for her early attendance, for her arriving there as soon as possible after themselves, for the purpose of taking her opinion as to the propriety and comfort of the rooms before any other persons came, that she could not refuse him, and must therefore spend some quiet interval in the young man's company. She was to convey Harriet, and they drove to the Crown in good time, the Randalls' party just sufficiently before them. Frank Churchill seemed to have been on the watch, and though he did not say much, his eyes declared that he meant to have a delightful evening. They all walked about together to see that everything was as it should be, and within a few minutes were joined by the contents of another carriage, which Emma could not hear the sound at first without great surprise. "So unreasonably early," she was going to exclaim, but she presently found that it was a family of old friends, who were coming like herself by particular desire to help Mr. Weston's judgment, and they were so very closely followed by another carriage of cousins. "Ratfucker 6, welcome in. I do so appreciate your joining us today, on this torrid Tuesday. I believe this is the first time you are here for one of these, so let me introduce you to the concept. On Tuesdays we read romance novels a little bit closer than usual. We are about 2/3 of the way through Emma at the moment, and a large ball is just about to begin with all the society of Highurry, and currently the early guests are just arriving. But do welcome in, and I hope you make yourself comfortable." It was a family of old friends who were coming, like herself, by particular desire to help Mr. Weston's judgment, and they were so very closely followed by another carriage of cousins, who had been entreated to come early with the same distinguishing earnestness, on the same errand, that it seemed as if half the company might soon be collected together for the purpose of preparatory inspection. Emma perceived that her taste was not the only taste on which Mr. Weston depended and felt. That to be the favourable and intimate of a man who had so many intimates in confidence was not the very first distinction in the scale of vanity. Well, enjoy your lurk, Ratfucker. She liked his open manners, but a little less of open-heartedness would have made him a higher character. General benevolence, not general friendship, made a man what he ought to be. She could fancy such a man. The whole party walked about, and looked and praised again, and then, having nothing else to do, formed a sort of half-circle around the fire, to observe in their various nodes, till other subjects were started, that, through May, a fire in the evening was still very pleasant. Emma found that it was not Mr. Weston's fault that the number of privy councillors was not yet larger. They had stopped at Mrs. Bates's door to offer the use of their carriage, but the aunt and niece were to be brought by the Eltons. Frank was standing by her, but not steadily. There was a restlessness which showed a mind not at ease. He was looking about, he was going to the door, he was watching for the sound of other carriages, impatient to begin, or afraid of always being near her. Mrs. Elton was spoken of. "I think she must be here soon," said he. "I have a great curiosity to see Mrs. Elton. I have heard so much of her. It cannot be long, I think, before she comes. Biscuit Rose, welcome in. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for the community to come with you. Welcome in, Raiders. For those of you who have never been here before, my name is SkitterSkreetch, and I am a small rat trapped inside a very large library.
Your favorite Rose has been bound to the library.
Your favorite Rose, thank you for the follow. Thank you all for joining us. Abbe, thank you for shouting out Biscuit Rose. Ooh, the ads want to come on. I shall snooze here. Well, welcome in. For those of you who are, as I say, unfamiliar, my name is SkitterSkreetch. I am a small rat trapped inside a very large library, and you've joined us today in our Torrid Tuesday stream, on the day which we read romance novels. Now, normally I tend to read things a little further from the mic, but given the nature of things, we like to set a little bit of ambience and have things be a little bit more intimate. So, yes, as Abbe says, if you do need to raid and run, take care of yourself, get a drink of water or some food. Do feel free. And if you want to go and do that, or if you wish to stay and lurk, I'm most happy for either occasion. I do thank you so very much for raiding in, though. But yes, do take care of yourself. At any rate, you join us now about 2/3 of the way into the novel, but the present context that is pertinent is that we are about to have a large ball with all the society of Highurry, which is the town in which we are set in the English countryside, attending. The notable players are the titular Emma Woodhouse, who is our narrator and protagonist, Mr Frank Churchill, who is a relation of a local man, but who has been brought up by rich out-of-town relatives and who is returning briefly, and is a big organiser behind this ball. Mr Elton, the town's vicar, and his new wife, Mrs Elton. Harriet, whom is a girl who Emma brought up, intending to match with Mr Elton himself. And the Westons, the Mrs Weston, who is Emma's former governess, and who is their introduction to Mr Frank Churchill, and Mr Weston, who is the father of Frank Churchill, and who is hosting this ball. But I think that's all the pertinent information you need to follow along if you wish to stay. And I do once again thank you so kindly for sharing your community with me, Biscuit Rose. Now, in the little time before the ads start, let's get a little more read, shall we? Mrs Elton was spoken of. I think she must be here soon, said he. I have a great curiosity to see Mrs Elton. I have heard so much of her. It cannot be long, I think, before she comes. A carriage was heard. He was on the move immediately, but coming back, said, I am forgetting that I am not acquainted with her. I have never seen either Mr. or Mrs. Elton. I have no business to put myself forward. Very good. Well, I hope you sleep well, my yellow clock. Mr. and Mrs. Elton appeared, and all the smiles and the proprieties passed. But Mrs. Bates and Miss Fairfax, said Mr. Weston. Oh, sorry, no, my mistake. But Mrs. Bates and Miss Fairfax, said Mr. Weston, looking about. We thought you were bringing them. The mistake had been slight. The carriage was sent for them now. Emma longed to know what Frank's first opinion of Mrs. Elton might be. How he was affected by the studied elegance of her dress, and her smiles of graciousness. He was immediately qualifying himself to form an opinion by giving her very proper attention after the introductions had passed. In a few minutes the carriage returned. Somebody talked of rain. I will see that there are umbrellas, sir, said Frank to his father. Miss Bates must not be forgotten. And away he went. Mr. Weston was following, but Mrs. Elton detained him to gratify him by her opinion of his son, and so briskly did she begin that the young man himself, though by no means moving slowly, could hardly be out of hearing. A very fine young man indeed, Mr. Weston. You know, I candidly told you I should form my own opinion, and I am happy to say that I am extremely pleased with him. You may believe me, I never compliment. I think of him as a very handsome young man, and his manners are precisely what I like and approve. So truly the gentleman, without the least conceit or puppyism. You must know I have a vast dislike to puppies, quite a horror of them, They were never tolerated at Maple Grove. Neither Mr. Suckling nor me had ever any patience with them, and we used sometimes to say very cutting things. Selina, who is mild almost to a fault, bore with them much better. While she talked of his son, Mr. Weston's attention was chained, but when she got to Maple Grove he could recollect that there were ladies just arriving to be attended to, and with happy smiles he mussed away. Mrs. Elton turned to Mrs. Weston. "I have no doubt of its being our carriage with Miss Bates and Jane. Our coachmen and horses are so extremely expeditious. I believe we drive faster than anybody. What a pleasure it is to send one's carriage for a friend. I understand you were so kind as to offer, but another time it would be quite unnecessary. You may be very sure I shall always take care of them." Miss Bates and Miss Fairfax, escorted by the two gentlemen, walked into the room, and Mrs. Elton seemed to think it as much her duty as Mrs. Weston's to receive them. Her gestures and movements might be understood by anyone who looked on like Emma, but her words, everybody's words, were soon lost under the incessant flow of Miss Bates, who came in, talking, and had not finished her speech under any minute after her being admitted into the circle of the fire. As the door opened, she was heard. And I will pause here because the ads are about to come on, and while I might snooze them again, I might do so only once, so you must bear on. And there they arrive, so I shall have my customary drink at the start of them. Now then, for those of you not stuck inside the ads, either because you are my loyal subscribers, are subscribed to, is it Twitch Turbo, or simply because the ads have not arrived, as they sometimes do not, what shall we make of this? Stretch. Very well. And we shall stretch. As is our habit now, we stretch the neck before we stand, so you might hear any cracks. Might have been one or two in there, we'll see. Then we stand and do the back. No cracking there, thankfully, but I do thank you for that most assiduously playing. I was in sore need of it. Now then, what to say of things so far in this chapter? Mr. Frank Churchill, restless and eager, is to see Miss Fairfax, as I suspect, and of course the new Mrs. Elton, seeming to take propriety of the whole thing, seeing herself as the central character of the play. Something that might be rather more grating, but not Emma herself in some way doing the same thing. Or she is in fact the main character of our novel, perhaps we can forgive her more for it. Of course we shall see... what will we see? We shall hear Harriet, again engaged with Mr. Elton and Mrs. Elton in the same room. Though also with Mr. with Mr. Frank Churchill, I should say, who, again, I believe Emma had some inclination of perhaps pairing up with him, so there may be some confusion and complexity there. What other players? Well, of course, Miss Bates, always talking. I don't recall if Mr. Knightley is coming or not. It would not surprise me if he was, though. As to any other players of particular note, I don't think so. So those are the things that are liable to be set up. Soon we shall see how they are knocked down. And yes, as the ad break is coming to a close, I shall have my second drink of the break. Once again, we'll thank Blake for the stretch, as I really did feel I needed it, now that I come to feel. And then as things come to an end, that should be the ad's finished, so welcome back in, everyone. We shall press immediately onwards. As the door opened, she was heard. So very obliging of you. No rain at all, but nothing to signify. I do not care for myself. quite thick shoes, and Jane declares, well, as soon as she was within the door, well, this is brilliant indeed, this is admirable, excellently contrived, upon my word, nothing wanting, could not have imagined it, so well lighted up. Jane, look, did you ever see anything? Oh, Mr. Weston, you must really have had Aladdin's lamp. Good Mrs. Stokes would not know her own room again. I saw her as I came in. She was standing in the entrance. Oh, Miss Stokes, said I, but I had no time for more. She was now met by Mrs. Weston. Very well, I thank you, ma'am. I hope you are quite well. Very happy to hear it. So afraid you might have a headache, seeing you pass by so often, knowing how much trouble you must have. Delighted to hear it again. Ah, dear Mrs. Elton, so obliged to you for the carriage. Excellent time, Jane and I quite ready. Did not keep the horses a moment. Most comfortable carriage. Oh, I'm sure our thanks are due to you, Mrs. Weston, on that score. Mrs. Elton had most kindly sent Jane a note, or we should have been but 2 such offers in one day. Never were such neighbours. I said to my mother, upon my word, ma'am. Thank you, my mother is remarkably well. Gone to Mr. Woodhouse's. I made her take her shawl, but the evenings are not so warm. Her large new shawl, at Mrs. Dixon's wedding present. So kind of her to think of my mother. Bought at Weymouth, you know. Mr. Dixon's choice. There were 3 others, Jane says, which they hesitated about some time. Colonel Campbell rather preferred an olive. My dear Jane, are you sure you did not wet your feet? It was but a drop or 2, but I'm so afraid. Mr. Frank Churchill was so extremely, and there was a mat to step upon. I shall never forget his extreme politeness. Oh, Mr. Frank Churchill, I must tell you my mother's spectacles have never been in fault since. The rivet never came out again. My mother often talks of your good nature, does not she, Jane? Do we not often talk of Mr. Frank Churchill? Ah, here's Miss Woodhouse. Dear Miss Woodhouse, how do you do? Very well, thank you, quite well. This is meeting quite in fairyland, such transformation. Must not compliment, I know, eyeing Emma most complacently. That would be rude, but upon my word, Miss Woodhouse, you do look. How do you like Jane's hair? You are a judge. She did it all herself. Quite wonderful how she does her hair. No hairdresser from London, I think, could. Ah, Dr. Hughes, I declare. And Mrs. Hughes. Must go and speak to Dr. and Mrs. Hughes for a moment. How do you do? How do you do? Very well, I thank you. That is delightful, is it not? Where's dear Mr. Richard? Oh, there he is. Don't disturb him. Much better employed talking to the young ladies. How do you do, Mr. Richard? I saw you the other day as you rode through the town. Mrs. Otway, I protest. And good Mr. Otway, and Miss Otway, and Miss Caroline, such a host of friends. And Mr. George and Mr. Arthur, how do you do? How do you all do? Quite well, I'm much obliged to you. Never better. Didn't I hear another carriage? Who can this be? Very likely the worthy Coles. Upon my word, this is charming, to be standing about among such friends. And such a noble fire, I'm quite roused. And no coffee, thank you, for me. Never take coffee. A little tea, if you please, sir, by and by. No hurry. Oh, here it comes. Everything's so good. Frank Churchill returned to his station by Emma, and as soon as Miss Bates was quiet, she found herself necessarily overhearing the discourse of Mrs. Elton and Miss Fairfax, who was standing a little way behind her. He was thoughtful. Whether he were overhearing too, she could not determine. After a good many compliments to Jane on her dress and look, compliments very quietly and properly taken, Mrs. Elton was evidently wanting to be complimented herself, and it was, "How do you like my gown? How do you like my trimmings? How has Wright done my hair?" With many other relentless questions, all answered with patient politeness. Mrs. Elton then said, "Nobody can think less of a dress in general than I do, but upon such an occasion as this, when everyone's eyes are so much open on me, or so much upon me, and in compliment to the Westons, who I have no doubt are giving this ball chiefly to do me honour, I would not wish to be inferior to others, and I see very few pearls in the room except mine. Sir Frank Churchill is a capital dancer, I understand. We shall see if our styles suit. A fine young man certainly is Frank Churchill. I like him very well." At this moment, Frank began talking so vigorously that Emma could not but imagine he had overheard his own praises, and did not want to hear more, and the voices of the ladies were drowned for a while, till another suspension brought Mrs. Elton's tones again distinctly forward. Mr. Elton had just joined them, and his wife was exclaiming, "Oh, you have found us at last, have you, in our seclusion? I was this moment telling Jane I thought you would begin to be impatient for tidings of us." "Jane," repeated Frank Churchill, with a look of surprise and displeasure. "That is easy. But Miss Fairfax is not disappointed, I suppose? Or does not disapprove it, I suppose?" "How do you like Miss Elton?" said Emma in a whisper. "Not at all." "You are ungrateful." "Ungrateful? What do you mean?" Then changing from a frown to a smile, "No, do not tell me. I do not want to know what you mean. Where is my father? When are we to begin dancing?" Emma could hardly understand him. He seemed in an odd humour. He walked off to find his father, but was quickly back again with both Mr. and Mrs. Weston. He had met with them in a little perplexity, which must be laid before Emma. It had just occurred to Mrs. Weston that Mrs. Elton must be asked to begin the ball, that she would expect it, which interfered with all their wishes of giving Emma that distinction. Emma heard the sad truth with fortitude. And so what are we to do for a proper partner for her?" said Mr. Weston. "She will think Frank ought to ask her." Frank turned instantly to Emma to claim her former promise, and boasted himself an engaged man, which his father looked his most perfect approbation of, and it then appeared that Mrs. Weston was wanting him to dance with Mrs. Elton himself, and that their business was to help to persuade him into it, which was done pretty soon. Mr. Weston and Mrs. Elton led the way. Mr. Frank Churchill and Miss Woodhouse followed. Emma must submit to stand second to Mrs. Elton, though she had always considered the ball as peculiarly for her. It was almost enough to make her think of marrying. Mrs. Elton had undoubtedly the advantage, at the time, in vanity completely gratified. For though she had intended to begin with Frank Churchill, she could not lose by the change. Mr. Weston might be his son's superior. In spite of this little rub, however, Emma was smiling with enjoyment, delighted to see the respectable length of the set as it was forming, and to feel that she had so many hours of unusual festivity before her. She was more disturbed by Mr. Knightley's not dancing than by anything else. There was among the standers by where he ought not to be. He ought to be dancing, not classing himself with the husbands and fathers and whist players, who were pretending to feel an interest in the dance till their rubbers were made up. So young as he looked, he could not have appeared to greater advantage perhaps anywhere than where he had placed himself. This tall, firm, upright figure, among the bulky forms and stooping shoulders of the elderly men, was such as Emma felt must draw everybody's eye, and excepting her own partner, there was not one among the whole row of young men who could be compared with him. He moved a few steps nearer, and those few steps were enough to prove in how gentlemanlike a manner, with what natural grace he must have danced, but he would take the trouble. Whenever she caught his eye, she forced him to smile, and in general he was looking grave. She wished he could love a ballroom better, and could like Frank Churchill better. He seemed often observing her. She must not flatter herself that he thought of her dancing, but if he were criticizing her behavior, she did not feel afraid. There was nothing like flirtation between her and her partner. They seemed more like cheerful, easy friends than lovers. That Frank Churchill thought less of her than he had done was indubitable. The hall proceeded pleasantly. The anxious cares, the incessant attention of Mrs. Weston were not thrown away. Everybody seemed happy, and the praises of being a delightful ball, which seldom bestowed till after a ball had ceased to be, were repeatedly given in the very beginning of the existence of this. Of every important, very recordable event, it was not more productive than such meetings usually are. There was one, however, which Emma thought something of. The 2 last dances before supper were begun, and Harriet had no partner. The only young lady sitting down, and so equal had been hitherto the number of dancers, that how there could be any one disengaged was the wonder. But Emma's wonder lessened soon afterwards, on seeing Mr. Elton sauntering about. He would not ask Harriet to dance if it were possible to be avoided. She was sure he would not. and she was expecting him every moment to escape into the card-room. Escape, however, was not his plan. He came to the part of the room where the sitters-by were collected, spoke to some, and walked about in front of them, as if to show his liberty and his resolution of maintaining it. He did not omit being sometime directly before Mrs. Smith, or speaking to those who were being directly before Miss Smith, or speaking to those who were close to her. Emma saw it. She was not yet dancing. She was working her way up from the bottom, and had therefore leisure to look around. And by only turning her head a little, she saw it all. When she was halfway up the set, the whole group were exactly behind her, and she would no longer allow her eye to watch. Mr. Elton was so near that she heard every syllable of a dialogue which just then took place between him and Mrs. Weston, and she perceived that his wife, who was standing immediately above her, was not only listening also, but even encouraging him by significant glances. The kind-hearted, gentle Mrs. Weston had left her seat to join him and say, Do not you dance, Mr. Elton?" Which the prompt reply was, "Most readily, Mrs. Weston, if you will dance with me." "Me? Oh, no. I would get you a better partner than myself. I am no dancer." "If Mrs. Gilbert wishes to dance," said he, "I shall have a great pleasure, I am sure. For though beginning to feel myself rather, I am an old married man, that my dancing days are over, it would give me very great pleasure at any time to stand up with an old friend like Mrs. Gilbert." "Mrs. Gilbert does not mean to dance, but there is a young lady disengaged, whom should be very glad to see dancing. Miss Smith." "Miss Smith? I had not observed. You are extremely obliging, and if I were not an old married man, but my dancing days are over, Mrs. Weston. You will excuse me. Anything else I should be most happy to do at your command, but my dancing days are over." Mrs. Weston said no more, and Emma could imagine with what surprise and mortification she must be returning to her seat. This was Mr. Elton, the amiable, obliging Mr. Elton. She looked round for a moment. He had joined Mr. Knightley at a little distance, and was arranging himself for settled conversation, while smiles of high glee passed between him and his wife. She would not look again. Her heart was in a glow, and she feared her face might be as hot. In another moment, a happier sight caught her. Mr. Knightley leading Harriet to the set. Never had she been more surprised, seldom more delighted than in that instant. She was all pleasure and gratitude, both for Harriet and herself, and longed to be thanking him. Although too distant for speech, her countenance said much, as soon as she could catch his eye again. His dancing proved to be just what she had believed it, extremely good, and Harriet would have seemed almost too lucky if it had not been for the cruel state of things before, and for the very complete enjoyment and very high sense of the distinction which her happy features announced. It was not thrown away on her. She bounded higher than ever, flew farther down the middle, and was in a continual course of smiles. Mr. Elton had retreated into the card-room, looking, Emma trusted, very foolish. She did not think he was quite so hardened as his wife, though growing very like her. She spoke some of her feelings by observing audibly to her partner, "Knightley has taken pity on poor little Miss Smith. Very good-natured, I declare." Supper was announced. The move began, and Miss Bates might be heard from that moment without interruption, till her being seated at the table and taking up her spoon. Jane, my dear Jane, where are you? Here is your tippet. Mrs. Weston begs you to put on your tippet. She says she is afraid there will be draughts in the passage, where everything has been done, one door nailed up. Quantities of matting, my dear Jane, indeed you must. Mr. Churchill, oh, you are too obliging. How will you put it on? I'm so gratified. Excellent dancing indeed. Yes, my dear. I ran home, as I said I should, to help Grandmamma to bed, and got back again and nobody missed me. I set off without a word, just as I told you. Grandmamma was quite well, had a charming evening with Mr. Woodhouse, a vast deal of chat, and backgammon. Tea was made downstairs, biscuits and baked apples and wine before she came away. Amazing luck in some of her throws. And she inquired a great deal about you, how you were amused, who was your partner. "Oh," said I shall not forestall. Jane, I left her dancing with Mr Gregory Otway, and she will love to tell you all about it herself tomorrow. Her first partner was Mr Elton. I do not know who will ask her next. Perhaps Mr William Cox. My dear sir, you are too obliging. Is there nobody you would not rather— I am not helpless. Sir, you are most kind. Upon my word. Jane on one arm and me on the other. Stop, let us stand a little back. Mrs Elton is going. Dear Mrs Elton, how elegant she looks. Beautiful lace. Now we all follow in her train. Quite the queen of the evening. Well, here we are at the passage. 2 steps, Jane, take care of the 2 steps. Oh, no, there is but one. Well, I was persuaded there were 2. How very odd. I was convinced there were 2, and there's but one. I never saw anything equal to the comfort and style. Candles everywhere. I was telling you of your grandmamma, Jane. There was a little disappointment. The baked apples and biscuits, excellent in their way, you know. There was a delicate fricassee of sweetbread and some asparagus brought in at first, and good Mr Woodhouse, not thinking the asparagus quite boiled enough, sent it all out again. Now, there's nothing that grandmamma loves better than sweetbread and asparagus. She was rather disappointed, but we agreed we would not speak of it to anybody. For fear it's getting round to dear Mr Woodhouse. He'll be so very much concerned. Well, this is brilliant. I'm all amazement. I could not have supposed anything. Such elegant and profusion. I have seen nothing like it since. Well, where shall we sit? Anywhere, so that Jane is not in a draught. Where I sit is of no consequence. Oh, do you recommend this side? Well, I'm sure, Mr Churchill. Only it seems too good. Just as you please. What you direct in this house cannot be wrong. Dear Jane, how shall we ever recollect half the dishes for grandmamma? Soup too, bless me. I should not be helped as soon, but it smells most excellent. I cannot help beginning. Emma had no opportunity of speaking to Mr Knightley till after supper, but when they were all in the ballroom again, her eyes invited him irresistibly to come to her and be thanked. He was warm in his reprobation of Mr Elton's conduct. It had been unpardonable rudeness, and Mrs Elton's looks also received the due share of censure. They aimed at wounding more than Harriet, said he. Emma, why is it that they are your enemies? He looked with smiling penetration and, on receiving no answer, added, She ought not be angry with you. I suspect whatever he may be. To surmise that you say nothing, of course, but confess, Emma, that you did want him to marry Harriet. I did, replied Emma, and they cannot forgive me. He shook his head. There was a smile of indulgence in it, and he only said, I shall not scold you. I leave you to your own reflections. Can you trust me with such flatteries? Does my vain spirit ever tell me I am wrong? Not your vain spirit, but your serious spirit. If one leads you wrong, I am sure the other tells you of it. I do own myself to have been completely mistaken in Mr Elton. There is a littleness about him which you discovered, and which I did not. I was fully convinced of his being in love with Harriet. It was through a series of strange blunders. And in return for your acknowledging so much, I will do you the justice to say that you would have chosen for him better than he has chosen for himself. Harriet Smith has some first-rate qualities, which Mrs Elton is totally without. An unpretending, single-minded, artless girl, infinitely to be preferred by any man of sense and taste to such a woman as Mrs Elton. I found Harriet more conversable than I expected. Emma was extremely gratified. They were interrupted by the bustle of Mr Weston, calling on everybody to begin dancing again. Come, Miss Woodhouse, Miss Ostway, Miss Fairfax, what are you all doing? Come, Emma, set your companions the example. Everybody is lazy, everybody is asleep. I am ready, said Emma, whenever I am wanted. Whom are you going to dance with? Asked Mr Knightley. She hesitated a moment and then replied, With you, if you will ask me. Will you? He said, offering his hand. Indeed I will. You have shown that you can dance, and you know we are not really so much brother and sister as to make it at all improper. Brother and sister? No, indeed. And that's the end of chapter 38. Well, well, well. There is some fine courtly drama beginning, isn't there? At any rate, I have a quick swallow of water. and for all that time is limited, I think it is worth having a little reflection on that chapter. The whole event coming to play, then. The snubbing of Miss Harriet Smith, and quite deliberately too. Subtle by some standards, but very loud by the time. And Mr. Knightley stepping in. And perhaps the first signs of my own perceived romance between himself and Emma coming to pass. That was a chapter indeed. I must say there's some prattle going on that, well, perhaps does not play so well aloud as it did in the novel, but pressing onward. Chapter 39. This little explanation with Mr. Knightley gave Emma considerable pleasure. It was one of the agreeable recollections of the ball which she walked about the lawn the next morning to enjoy. She was extremely glad that they had come to so good an understanding respecting the Eltons, and that their opinions of both husband and wife were so much alike, and his praise of Harriet, his concession in her favour, was peculiarly gratifying. The impertinence of the Eltons, which for a few minutes had threatened to ruin the rest of the evening, had been the occasion of some of its highest satisfactions, and she looked forward to another happy result, the cure of Harriet's infatuation. From Harriet's manner of speaking of the circumstance before they quitted the ballroom, she had strong hopes. It seemed as if her eye was suddenly opened, and she were enabled to see that Mr. Elton was not the superior creature she had believed him. The fever was over, and Emma could harbour little fear of the pulse being quickened again by injurious courtesy. She depended upon the evil feelings of the Eltons for supplying all the discipline of pointed neglect that could be further requisite. Harriet rational, Frank Churchill not too much in love, and Mr. Knightley not wanting to quarrel with her. How very happy a summer must be before her. She was not to see Frank Churchill this morning. He had told her that he could not allow himself the pleasure of stopping at Hartfield, as he was to be at home by the middle of the day. She did not regret it. Having arranged all these matters, looked them through and put them all to rights, she was just turning to the house with spirits freshened up for the demands of the two boys as well as their grandpa, when the great iron sweep gate opened and two persons entered whom she had never less expected to see together. Frank Churchill, with Harriet leaning on his arm. Actually Harriet. A moment sufficed to convince her that something extraordinary had happened. Harriet looked white and frightened, and he was trying to cheer her. The iron gates and the front door were not 20 yards asunder. They were all three soon in the hall, and Harriet, immediately sinking into a chair, fainted away. A young lady who faints must be recovered, questions must be answered, and surprises explained. Such events are very interesting, but the suspense of them cannot last long. A few minutes made Emma acquainted with the whole. Miss Smith and Miss Bickerton, another parlour boarder at Mrs. Goddard's, who had been also at the ball, had walked out together, and taken a road, the Richmond Road, which, though apparently public enough for safety, had led them into alarm. About half a mile beyond Highbury, making a sudden turn and deeply shaded by elms on each side, it became for a considerable stretch very retired, and when the young ladies had advanced some way into it, they had suddenly perceived at a small distance before them, on a broader patch of greensward by the side, a party of gypsies. A child on the watch came towards them to beg, and Miss Bickerton, excessively frightened, gave a great scream, and calling on Harriet to follow her, ran up a steep bank, cleared a slight hedge at the top, and made the best of her way by a short cut back to Highbury. But poor Harriet could not follow. She had suffered very much from cramp after dancing, and her first attempt to mount the bank brought on such a return of it as made her absolutely powerless, and in this state, and exceedingly terrified, she had been obliged to remain. How the trampers might have behaved had the young ladies been more courageous must be doubtful, but such an invitation for attack could not be resisted, and Harriet was soon assailed by half a dozen children, headed by a stout woman and a great boy, all clamorous and impertinent in look, and not absolutely in words. More and more frightened, she immediately promised them money, and, taking out her purse, gave them a shilling and begged them not to want more or to use her ill. She was then able to walk, though but slowly, and was moving away, but her terror and her purse were too tempting, and she was followed, or rather surrounded by the whole gang, demanding more. In this state Frank Churchill had found her. Still she trembling and conditioning, they loud and insolent. By a most fortunate chance, his leaving Highurry had been delayed so as to bring him to her assistance at this critical moment. The pleasantness of the morning had induced him to walk forward and leave his horses to meet him by another road, a mile or two beyond Highurry. And happening to have borrowed a pair of scissors the night before of Miss Bates, and to have forgotten to restore them, he had been obliged to stop at her door and go in for a few minutes. He was therefore later than he had intended, and being on foot was unseen by the whole party, till almost close to them. The terror which the woman and boy had been creating in Harriet was then their own portion. He had left them completely frightened, and Harriet eagerly clinging to him, and hardly able to speak, had just strength enough to reach Hartfield before her spirits were quite overcome. It was his idea to bring her to Hartfield. He had thought of no other place. This was the amount of the whole story, of his communication of Harriet's as soon as she had recovered her senses and speech. He dared not stay longer than to see her well. These several delays left him not another minute to lose, and Emma, engaging to give assurance of her safety to Mrs. Goddard, and notice of there being a set of people in the neighbourhood to Mr. Knightley, he set off with all the grateful blessing that she could utter for her friend and herself. Such an adventure as this, a fine young man and a lovely young woman thrown together in such a way, could hardly fail of suggesting certain ideas to the coldest heart and the steadiest brain. So Emma thought, at least. Could a linguist, could a grammarian, could even a mathematician have seen what she did, have witnessed their appearance together and heard their history of it, without feeling that circumstance had been at work to make them peculiarly interesting to each other? How much more must an imaginist like herself be on fire with speculation and foresight, especially with such a groundwork of anticipation as her mind had already made? It was a very extraordinary thing. Nothing of the sort had ever occurred before to any young ladies in the place, within her memory. No rencontre, no alarm of this kind. And now it had happened to the very person, and at the very hour, when the other very person was chancing to pass by to rescue her. It certainly was very extraordinary, and knowing as she did the favourable state of mind of each at this period, it struck her the more. He was just wishing to get the better of his attachment to herself, she just recovering from her mania for Mr. Elton. It seemed as if everything united to promise the most interesting consequence. It was not possible that the occurrence should not be strongly recommending each to the other. In the few minutes' conversation which she had yet had with him, while Harriet had been partially insensible, he had spoken of her terror, her naivete, her fervour as she had seized and clung to his arm, with a sensibility amused and delighted. And just at last, after Harriet's own account had been given, he had expressed his indignation at the abominable folly of Miss Bickerton in the warmest terms. Everything was to take its natural course, however, neither impelled nor assisted. She would not stir a step, nor drop a hint. No, she had had enough of interference. There could be no harm in a scheme, a mere passive scheme. It was no more than a wish. Beyond it she would on no account proceed. Emma's first resolution was to keep her father from the knowledge of what had passed, aware of the anxiety and alarm it would occasion. But she soon felt that the concealment must be impossible. Within half an hour it was known all over Highbury. It was the very event to engage those who talked most. The young and the low, and all the youth and servants in the place were soon in the happiestness of frightful news. The last night's ball seemed lost in the gipsies. Poor Mr. Woodhouse trembled as he sat, and as Emma had foreseen, would scarcely be satisfied without their promising never to go beyond the shrubbery again. It was some comfort to him that many inquiries after himself and Miss Woodhouse, for his neighbours knew that he loved to be inquired after, as well as Miss Smith, were coming in during the rest of the day, and he had the pleasure of returning for answer that they were all very indifferent, which though not exactly true, for she was perfectly well, and Harriet not much otherwise, Emma would not interfere with. She had an unhappy state of health in general for the child of such a man, for she hardly knew what indisposition was, and if he did not invent illness for her, she could make no figure in a message. The gipsies did not wait for the operations of justice. They took themselves off in a hurry. the young ladies of Highurry might have walked again in safety before their panic began. The whole history dwindled soon into a matter of little importance. But to Emma and her nephews, it is the imagination that maintained its ground. In her imagination it maintained its ground, and Henrietta John was still asking every day for the story of Harriet and the gypsies, and still tenaciously setting her right if she varied in the slightest particular from the original recital. That's the end of chapter 39. And again we run across some of the pitfalls of reading older stories and novels. Allow me a quick swallow of water before I go into it. So, aside from the somewhat derogatory term for people of the Romani descent, thank you, Plague, I shall do so. Break the neck. And the back. Thank you for that. But as I say, aside from the somewhat unfortunate term employed here for people of Romani descent, I do think it is also worth noting that, for all that is framed as quite a dramatic and harrowing encounter, what in truth happened was that two young women encountered a group of beggars in a somewhat remote place from the road, and the beggars begged at them rather aggressively, and one of them ran away and the other gave them some money and was being asked for more, which, I mean, I'm sure it was a somewhat unpleasant experience for someone as sheltered as a gentlewoman would be, but I must admit, as a rat, I don't have too much sympathy for the occasion. Still, though, it is what it is. And of course we cannot deny people their hardship, even if we do not see it as a hardship ourselves. To each their circumstance. And of course languages as languages at the time. Still, not my favourite chapter. It does, it seems, begin to hint at the possibility of a match between Harriet and Mr Frank Churchill. It surprises me. I thought Miss Jane Fairfax was the object of his affections. And who knows, maybe she still is. It might be Emma again reading into things that are not there. But, having stretched and rendered our verdict, let us press on. Chapter 40. A very few days had passed after this adventure, when Harriet came one morning to Emma with a small parcel in her hand, and after sitting down and hesitating, thus began. Miss Woodhouse, if you are at leisure, I have something that I should like to tell you, a sort of confession to make, and then you know it will be over. Emma was a good deal surprised, begged her to speak. There was a seriousness in Harriet's manner which prepared her quite as much as her words for something more than ordinary. It is my duty, and I'm sure it is my wish. It is my duty, and I'm sure it is my wish, she continued, to have no reserves with you on this subject. As I am happily quite an altered creature in one respect, it is very fit that you should have the satisfaction of knowing it. I do not want to say more than is necessary. I am too much ashamed of having given way as I have done. I dare say you understand me. Yes, said Emma, I hope I do. How could I so long a time be fancying myself? Cried Harriet warmly. It seems like madness. I can see nothing at all extraordinary in him now. I do not care whether I meet him or not, except that of the two I had rather not see him, and indeed I would go any distance round to avoid him. But I do not envy his wife in the least, neither admire her nor envy her, as I have done. She is very charming, I dare say, and all that, but I think her very ill-tempered and disagreeable. I shall never forget her look the other night. However, I assure you, Miss Woodhouse, I wish her no evil. No, let them be ever so happy together. It will not give me another moment's pang. And to convince you that I have been speaking the truth, I am now going to destroy what I ought to have destroyed so long ago, what I ought never to have kept. I know that very well. Blushing as she spoke. However, now I will destroy it all, and it is my particular wish to do it in your presence, You may see how rational I am grown. How would you guess what this parcel holds? Said she with a conscious look. Not the least in the world. Did he ever give you anything? No, I cannot call them gifts, but they are things that I have valued very much. She held the parcel towards her, and Emma read the words, "Most precious treasures" on the top. Her curiosity was greatly excited. Harriet unfolded the parcel, and she looked on with impatience. Within abundance of silver paper was a pretty little Tunbridge ware box, which Harriet opened. It was well lined with the softest cotton, but, excepting the cotton, Emma saw only a small piece of court plaster, a plaister. "Now," said Harriet, "you must recollect." "No, indeed, I do not." "Dear me, I should not have thought it possible you could forget what passed in this very room about court plaister, one of the very last times we ever met in it. It was but a few days before I had my sore throat, just before Mr and Mrs John Knightley came, I think that very evening. Don't you remember his cutting his finger with your new penknife, and your recommending court plaister? But as you had none about you, and knew I had, you desired me to supply him, and so I took mine out and cut him a piece. It was a great deal too large, and he cut it smaller. He kept playing some time with what was left behind before he gave it back to me. And so then in my nonsense I could not help making a treasure of it. So I put it by never to be used, and looked at it now and then as a great treat." "My dearest Harriet," cried Emma, putting her hand before her face and jumping up, "you make me more ashamed of myself than I can bear. Remember it. I remember it all now, all except your saving this relic. I knew nothing of that till this moment. With the cutting the finger and my recommending court plaister, and saying I had none about me. Oh, my sins, my sins! And I had plenty all the while in my pocket, one of my senseless tricks. I deserve to be under a continual blush all the rest of my life. Well," sitting down again, "go on, what else? And had you really some at hand yourself? I'm sure I never suspected it, you did it so naturally. And you actually put this piece of court plaster by for his sake?" said Emma, recovering from her state of shame, and feeling divided between wonder and amusement. And secretly she added to herself, "Lord bless me, when should I ever have thought of putting on by and cotton a piece of court plaster that Frank Churchill has been pulling about? I never was equal to this." "Here," resumed Harriet, turning to her box again, "here is something still more valuable. I mean that has been more valuable, because this is what did really once belong to him, which the court plaister never did." Emma was quite eager to see this superior treasure. It was the end of an old pencil, a part without any lead. "This was really his," said Harriet. "But do you not remember one morning? No, I dare say you do not. But one morning, I forget exactly the day, but perhaps it was the Tuesday or Wednesday before that evening, he wanted to make a memorandum in his pocket-book. It was about spruce beer. Mr Knightley had been telling him something about brewing spruce beer, and he wanted to put it down. When he took out his pencil, there was so little lead that he soon cut it all away, and it would not do, so you lent him another, and this was left upon the table as good for nothing. But I kept my eyes on it, and soon as I dared, caught it up, and never parted with it again from that moment." "I do remember it," cried Emma. "I perfectly remember it, talking about spruce beer. Oh, yes. Mr Knightley and I both saying we liked it, and Mr Elton seeming resolved to learn to like it too. I perfectly remember it. Stop. Mr Knightley was standing just here, was he not? I have an idea he was standing just here. Ah, I do not know. I cannot recollect. It is very odd, but I cannot recollect. Mr Elton was sitting here. I remember much about where I am now." "Well, go on." "Oh, that's all. I have nothing more to show you, or to say, except that I am now going to throw them both behind the fire, and I wish you to see me do it." "My poor dear Harriet, have you actually found happiness in treasuring up these things?" "Yes, simpleton as I was, but I am quite ashamed for it now, and wish I could forget as easily as I can burn them. It was very wrong of me, you know, to keep any remembrance after he was married. I knew it was, but I had not resolution enough to part with them." "But Harriet, is it necessary to burn the old court plaister? I have not a word to say for the bit of old pencil, but the court plaister might be useful. I shall be happier to burn it, replied Harriet. It is a disagreeable look to me. I must get rid of everything. There it goes, and there it is to end, thank heaven, of Mr Elton. And when, thought Emma, will there be a beginning of Mr Churchill? She had soon afterwards reason to believe that the beginning was already made, and could not but hope that the gipsy, though she had told no fortune, might prove to have made Harriet's. About a fortnight after the alarm, they came to a sufficient explanation, and quite undesignedly, Emma was not thinking of it at the moment, which made the information she received more valuable. She merely said, in the course of some trivial chat, "Well, Harriet, whenever you marry, I would advise you to do so and so," and thought no more of it, till after a minute's silence she heard Harriet say, in a very serious tone, "I shall never marry." Emma then looked up, and immediately saw how it was, and after a moment's debate as to whether it should pass unnoticed or not, replied, "Never marry? This is a new resolution, one that I shall never change, however." Another short hesitation. I hope it's not in compliment to Mr Elton." "Mr Elton, indeed," cried Harriet indignantly. "Oh, no." And Emma could just catch the word, "so superior to Mr Elton." She then took a longer time for consideration. Should she proceed no further? Should she let it pass and seem to support nothing? Perhaps Harriet might think her cold or angry if she did. Or perhaps, if she were totally silent, it might only drive Harriet into asking her to hear too much, and against anything like such an unreserve as had been such an open and frequent discussion of hopes and chances, she was perfectly resolved. She believed it would be wise of her to say and know at once all that she meant to say and know. Plain dealings are always best. She had previously determined how far she would proceed on any application of the sort. It would be safer for both to have the judicious law of her own brain laid down with speed. She decided and thus spoke. "Harriet, I will not affect to be in doubt of your meaning. Your resolution, or rather your expectation of never marrying, results from my idea that the person whom you might prefer would be too greatly your superior in situation to think of you. Is it not so?" "Oh, Miss Woodhouse, believe me, I have not the presumption to suppose. Indeed, I am not so mad. But it is a pleasure to me to admire him at a distance, and to think of his infinite superiority to all the rest of the world, with the gratitude, wonder, and veneration which are all so proper, in me especially. I am not at all surprised at you, Harriet. The service he rendered was enough to warm your heart." "Service? Oh, it was such an inexpressible obligation. The very recollection of it and all that I felt at the time, when I saw him coming, his noble look, and my wretchedness before. Such a change. In one moment such a change. From perfect misery to perfect happiness. It is very natural. It is natural and it is honourable, yes, honourable, I think, to choose so well and so gratefully. But that it will be a fortunate preference is more than I can promise. I do not advise you to give weight to it, Harriet. I do not by any means engage for it being returned. Consider what you are about. Perhaps it would be wisest in you to check your feelings while you can. At any rate, do not let them carry you afar, unless you are persuaded of his liking you. Be observant of him. Let his behaviour be the guide of your sensations. I give you this caution now, because I shall never speak to you again on the subject. I am determined against all interference. Henceforward I know nothing of the matter. Let no new name ever pass our lips. We were very wrong before, we will be cautious now. He is your superior, no doubt, and there do seem objections and obstacles of a very serious nature. But yet, Harriet, more wonderful things have taken place. There have been matches of greater disparity. Take care of yourself. I would not have you too sanguine, though however it may end. Be assured that your raising your thoughts to him is a mark of good taste, which I shall always know to value." Harriet kissed her hand in silent and submissive gratitude. Emma was very decided in thinking such an attachment no bad thing for her friend. Its tendency would be to raise and refine her mind, and it must be saving her from the danger of degradation. And that's the end of chapter 40. And given that They did not say the name of Mr Frank Churchill, and then Emery is of course so certain and sure that it's Mr Frank Churchill that they're speaking of, and giving the vagueness and double meaning, I am now absolutely and 100% convinced that our dear Harriet has developed feelings for Mr John, or not for Mr John, for Mr Knightley, who came to her rescue in the ball. And of course, no doubt this will not be explained until some other embarrassing series of, comedy of errors should come to pass. I begin to fear I'm reading too many of these, because that occurred to me very, very quickly. I almost spoil myself, but still. Let me have a quick swallow of water and we'll press on, shall we? I do not think we'll go too much further tonight. Perhaps only another chapter or two, depending. But I have a point in which I wish to get in this book in my mind, and so we shall strive to reach it. Chapter 41. In this state of schemes and hopes and connivance, June opened upon Hartfield. To Highbury in general had brought no material change. The Eltons were still talking of visit from the Sucklings, and of the use to be made of their barouche landau, and Jane Fairfax was still at her grandmother's. And as the return of the Campbells from Ireland was again delayed, and August instead of midsummer fixed for it, she was likely to remain there a full 2 months longer, provided at least she was able to defeat Mrs Elton's activity in her service, and save herself from being hurried into a delightful situation against her will. Mr Knightley, who, for some reason best known to himself, had certainly taken an early dislike to Frank Churchill, was only growing to dislike him more. He began to suspect him of some double-dealing in his pursuit of Emma. That Emma was his object appeared indisputable. Everything declared it. His own attentions, his father's hints, his mother-in-law's guarded silence. It was all in unison. Words, conduct, discretion and indiscretion told the same story. But whilst so many were devoting him to Emma, and Emma herself making him over to Harriet, Mr Knightley began to suspect him of some inclination to trifle with Jane Fairfax. I'm going to take a moment here to pause and say, you're a good one, Mr Knightley. You agree with me, you get it. To trifle with Jane Fairfax. He could not understand it, but there were symptoms of intelligence between them. He thought so at least. Symptoms of admiration on his side which, having once observed, he could not persuade himself to think entirely void of meaning. However, he might wish to escape any of Emma's errors of imagination. She was not present with when the suspicion first arose. He was dining with the Randalls family, and Jane at the Eltons. And he had seen a look more than a single look at Miss Fairfax, which, from the admirer of Miss Woodhouse, seemed somewhat out of place. When he was again in their company, he could not help remembering what he had seen, nor could he avoid observations which, unless it were like Cowper and his fire at twilight, myself creating what I saw, brought him yet stronger suspicions of there being something of private liking, and private understanding, even, between Frank Churchill and Jane. He had walked up one day after dinner, as he very often did, to spend his evening at Hartfield. Emma and Harriet were going to walk. He joined them, and on returning they fell in with a larger party who, like themselves, judged it wiser to take their exercise early, as the weather threatened to rain. Mr and Mrs Elton and their son, Miss Bates, and her niece, who had accidentally met, they all united, and, on reaching Hartfield gates, Emma, who knew it was exactly the sort of visiting that would be welcome to her father, pressed them all to go in and drink tea with him. The Randalls party agreed to it immediately, and, after a pretty long speech from Miss Bates, which few persons listened to, she also found it possible to accept dear Miss Woodhouse's most obliging invitation. As they were turning into the grounds, Mr Perry passed by on horseback. The gentleman spoke of his horse. By the by, said Frank Churchill to Mrs Weston presently, what became of Mr Perry's plan of setting up his carriage? Mrs Weston looked surprised and said, I did not know he ever had any such plan. Nay, I heard it from you. You wrote me word of it 3 months ago. Me? Impossible. Indeed you did. I remember it perfectly. You mentioned it as You mentioned it as what was certainly to be very soon. Mrs. Perry had told somebody and was extremely happy about it. It was owing to her persuasion she thought his being out in bad weather did him a great deal of harm. You must remember it now. Upon my word, I never heard of it till this moment. Never, really never. Bless me, how could it be? Then I must have dreamt it. But I was completely persuaded. Miss Smith, you walk as if you were tired. You'll not be sorry to find yourself at home. What is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? Cried Mr. Weston. Perry in a carriage. Is Perry going to set up his carriage, Frank? I'm glad he can afford it. You had it from himself, had you? No, sir, replied his son, laughing. I seem to have had it from nobody. Very odd, very odd. I really was persuaded of Mrs. Weston's having mentioned it to me in one of her letters to Enscombe, many weeks ago, with all these particulars. She declares she never heard a syllable of it before. Of course, it must have been a dream. I am a great dreamer. I dream of everybody at Highurry when I am away. And when I have gone through my particular friends, I begin to dreaming of Mr. and Mrs. Perry. It is odd, though, observed his father, that you should have had such a regular connected dream about people with whom it was not very likely you should be thinking of at Enscombe. Perry setting up his carriage, and his wife's persuading him to it. Out of care for his health. Just what will happen, I have no doubt, some time or other. Only a little premature. But an air of probability sometimes runs through a dream. But others, what a heap of absurdities it is. Well, Frank, your dream certainly shows that Highbury is in your thoughts when you're absent. Emma, you were a great dreamer, I think. Emma was out of hearing. She'd hurried on before her guests to prepare her father for the appearance, and was beyond the reach of Mr. Weston's hint. Why to the truth? cried Miss Bates, who must have been trying in vain to be heard the last 2 minutes. If I may speak on that subject, there is no denying that Mr. Frank Churchill might have. I do not mean to say that he did not dream it. I am sure I have sometimes had the oddest dream in the world. But if I am questioned about it, I must acknowledge that there was such an idea last spring. And Mrs. Perry herself mentioned it to my mother, and the Coles knew of it as well as ourselves. It was quite a secret known to nobody else, and only thought about 3 days. Mrs. Perry was very anxious that he should have a carriage, and came to my mother in great spirits one morning, because she thought she had prevailed. Jane, don't you remember Grandmamma's telling us about it when we got home? I forget where we had been walking to. Very likely to Randall's, yes. I think it was to Randall's. Mrs. Perry was always particularly fond of my mother. Indeed, I do not know who is not. And she had mentioned it to her in confidence, and had no objection of telling us, of course. It was not to go beyond. And from that day to this, I never mentioned it to a soul that I know of. At the same time, I will not positively answer for my having never dropped a hint, because I know I do sometimes pop out a thing before I am aware. I am a talker, you know. I am rather a talker, and now and then I have let a thing escape me which I should not. I am not like Jane. I wish I were. I will answer for it she never betrayed the least thing in the world. Where is she? Oh, just behind. Perfectly remember Mrs. Perry's coming. Extraordinary dreams indeed. They were entering the hall, and Mr. Knightley's eyes had preceded Miss Bates in the glance at Jane. From Frank Churchill's face, where he thought he saw confusion suppressed or laughed away, he had involuntarily turned to hers, but she was indeed behind, and too busy with her shawl. Mr. Weston had walked in. The 2 other gentlemen waited at the door to let her pass. Mr. Knightley suspected in Frank Churchill the determination of catching her eye. He seemed watching her intently, in vain, however, if it were so. Jane passed between them into the hall, and looked at neither. There was no time for further remark or explanation. The dream must be borne with, and Mr. Knightley must take his seat, the rest round the large, modern, circular table, which Emma had introduced at Hartfield, which none but Emma could have had power to place there and persuade her father to use, instead of the small-sized Pembroke, on which 2 of his daily meals had for 40 years been crowded. Tea passed pleasantly, and nobody seemed in a hurry to move. Miss Woodhouse, said Frank Churchill, after examining a table behind him, which he could reach as he sat, have your nephews taken away their alphabets, their box of letters? It used to stand here. Where is it? This is a sort of dull-looking evening, though ought to be treated rather as winter than summer. We had great amusement with those letters one morning. I want to puzzle you again." Emma was pleased with the thought, and producing the box, the table was quickly scattered over with alphabets, which no one seemed so much disposed to employ as their two selves. They were rapidly forming words for each other, or for anybody else who would be puzzled. The quietness of the game made it particularly eligible for Mr Woodhouse, who had often been distressed by the more animated sort, which Mr Weston had occasionally introduced, and who now sat happily occupied in lamenting, with tender melancholy, over the departure of the poor little boys, and fondly pointing out, as he took up any stray letter near him, how beautifully Emma had written it. Frank Churchill placed a word before Miss Fairfax. She gave a slight glance round the table and applied herself to it. Frank was next to Emma, Jane opposite to him, and Mr Knightley so placed as to see them all. It was his object to see as much as he could, with as little apparent observation. The word was discovered, and with a faint smile pushed away. If meant to be immediately mixed with others and buried from sight, she should have looked on the table instead of looking just across, for it was not mixed, and Harriet, eager after every fresh word, and finding none directly, took it up and fell to works. Fair enough. I'll hydrate then at Abby's request, and as we're about to come to the ads, I shall pause there for those adverts. Just marking my place. Now then, to your health be it, Abby. Cheers. And as at the outbreak I normally take a drink anyhow, I shall take another also to your health. Nastrovia. Well then. Again I am made fond of Mr Knightley, for he again has cottoned on to my own idea that Mr Frank Churchill has an interest in Miss Jane Fairfax. And indeed we are paused right on the edge of what I suspect would be rather a notable revelation. To that effect. That being the case, though, what else can we say? It's been a fairly eventful little section of the novel, really. The problem is that after every eventful chapter I've actually paused to go over them, which perhaps I shouldn't do, because now, during the break, we don't have much to talk on. I suppose there is something. Emma has seemingly learned something of a lesson from her last little period of matchmaking, where while she is encouraging and advising Mrs Smith again, she isn't so much leading her as strongly this time. Which, I suppose is a lesson in the right direction, although if I'm correct in that Miss Smith fancies Mr Knightley rather than Mr Churchill, it may lead to another confusion of errors. Although Harriet being attached to Mr Knightley does rather sink my own ship, or I expected Emma to wind up with Mr Knightley. Indeed, I rather expected that Harriet would end up with that young farmer whom I forget his name, who asked her to marry him in the beginning and was rejected. I thought that that relationship might be mended and all things come good. But I may be wrong. At any rate, what else is there to say? Not too much. Let me just double check the length of this chapter, but I suspect that there is about to be a significant revelation. Well, it's rather on the longer side, so I think this will be our last chapter for tonight. So I do hope you are all prepared. But yeah. Still, we're reaching the end game now. A little over 100 pages left. I think probably 2 readings. I could try and do all the rest in one sitting, but it would be something of a stretch. I think a normal length reading next week, and then perhaps a longer one the week after. So something to look forward to. But the ads are almost ending, so I'll have another quick swallow of water. And there everyone should be back, so that being the case, let us press on. So then, and for those of you who were in the ads and didn't hear me, I suspect this will be our last chapter tonight, so not too much longer. The word was discovered, and with a faint smile pushed away. If meant to be immediately mixed in with the others and buried from sight, she should have looked at the table instead of looking just across, for it was not mixed, and Harriet, eager after every fresh word and finding out none, directly took it up and fell to work. She was sitting by Mr. Knightley, and she turned to him for help. The word was blunder, and as Harriet exultingly proclaimed it, there was a blush on Jane's cheek, which gave it a meaning not otherwise ostensible. Mr. Knightley connected it with the dream, but how it could all be was beyond his comprehension. How the delicacy, the discretion of his favourite could have been so lain asleep. He feared there must be some decided involvement. This ingenuousness and double-dealing seemed to meet him at every turn. These letters were but the vehicle for gallantry and trick. It was a child's play, chosen to conceal a deeper game on Frank Churchill's part. With great indignation did he continue to observe him. With great alarm and distrust, to observe also his two blinded companions. He saw a short word prepared for Emma, and given to her with a look sly and demure. He saw that Emma had soon made it out, and found it highly entertaining. It was something which she judged proper to appear for censure, or she said, "Nonsense, for shame." He heard Frank Churchill next say, with a glance towards Jane, "I will give it to her, shall I?" And as clearly heard Emma opposing it, with eager laughing warmth. "No, no, you must not. You shall not indeed." It was done, however. This gallant young man, whom seemed to love without feeling, and to recommend himself without complacence, directly handed over the word to Miss Fairfax, and with a particular degree of sedate civility entreated her to study it. Mr. Knightley's excessive curiosity to know what this word might be made him seize every possible moment for darting his eye towards it. It was not long before he saw it to be Dixon. Jane Fairfax's perception seemed to accompany his. Her comprehension was certainly more equal to the covert meaning, the superior intelligence of those 5 letters so arranged. She was evidently displeased, looked up, and seeing herself watched, blushed more deeply than he had ever perceived her, and saying only, "I did not know that proper names were allowed," pushed away the letters with even an angry spirit, and looked resolved to be engaged by no other word that could be offered. Her face was averted from those who had made the attack, and turned towards her aunt. "Aye, very true, my dear," cried the latter, though Jane had not spoken a word. "I was just going to say the same thing. It's time for us to be going, indeed. The evening is closing in, and Grandmamma will be looking for us. My dear sir, you are too obliging. We really must wish you good night." Jane's alertness and moving proved her as ready as her aunt had preconceived. She was immediately up and wanted to quit the table, but so many were so moving that she could not get away, and Mr. Knightley thought he saw another collection of letters anxiously pushed towards her, and resolutely swept away by her unexamined. She was afterwards looking for her shawl. Frank Churchill was looking also. It was growing dusk, and the room was in confusion, and how they parted Mr. Knightley could not tell. He remained at Hartfield after all the rest, his thoughts full of what he had seen. So full that when the candles came to assist his observation, he must, yes, he certainly must, as a friend, an anxious friend, give Emma some hint, ask her some question. He could not see her in a situation of such danger without trying to preserve her. It was his duty. "Pray, Emma," said he, "may I ask in what lay the great amusement, the poignant sting of the last word given to you and Miss Fairfax? I saw the word, and am curious to know how it could be so very entertaining to the one and so very distressing to the other." Emma was extremely confused. She could not endure to give him the true explanation, though her suspicions were by no means removed. She was really ashamed of having ever imparted them. "Oh," she cried in evident embarrassment, "it's all meant nothing, a mere joke among ourselves." "This joke," he replied gravely, "seemed confined to you and Mr. Churchill." He had hoped she would speak again, but she did not. She would rather busy herself about anything than speak. He sat a little while in doubt. A variety of evils crossed his mind. Interference, fruitless interference. Emma's confusion and the acknowledged intimacy seemed to declare her affection engaged. Yet he would speak. He owed it to her to risk anything that might be involved in an unwelcome interference, rather than her welfare to encounter anything, rather than the remembrance of neglect in such case. "My dear Emma," said he at last, with earnest kindness, "do you think you perfectly understand the degree of acquaintance between the gentleman and lady we have been speaking of?" "Between Mr Frank Churchill and Miss Fairfax? Oh yes, perfectly. Why do you make a doubt of it?" "Have you never at any time had reason to think that he admired her, or she admired him?" "Never, never," she cried, with most open eagerness. "Never for the 20th part of a moment did such an idea occur to me. And how could it possibly come into your head?" "I have lately imagined that I saw symptoms of attachment between them, certain expressive looks which I did not believe meant to be public." "Oh, you amuse me excessively. I am delighted to find that you can vouchsafe to let your imagination wander. But it will not do. Very sorry to check you in your first essay. But indeed it will not do. There is no admiration between them, I do assure you. And the appearances which have caught you have arisen from some peculiar circumstances, feeling rather of a totally different nature. It is impossible exactly to explain. There is a good deal of nonsense in it, and the part which is capable of being communicated, which is sense, is that they are as far away from any attachment or admiration for one another as any two beings in the world can be. That is, I presume it to be so on her side, and I can answer for it being so on his side. I will answer for the gentleman's indifference." She spoke with a confidence which staggered with a satisfaction which silenced Mr. Knightley. She was in gay spirits, and would have prolonged the conversation, wanting to hear the particulars of his suspicion, every look described, and all to the wheres and hows of circumstance, which highly entertained her. But his gaiety did not meet hers. He found he could not be useful, and his feelings were too much irritated for talking. That he might not be irritated into absolute fever by the fire which Mr. Woodhouse's tender habits required almost every evening throughout the year, he soon afterwards took a hasty leave and walked home to the coolness and solitude of Donwell Abbey. And that's the end of chapter 42. And again, we shall call that the last for tonight. But time grows long and my throat grows a little weary, so excuse me a moment. And there we are, back to our normal circumstance. Now then, before we retire, a little bit of consideration. There does seem to be some symptom of attachment between our dear Mr. Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax. Thank you, Abbe, I do appreciate it. And indeed, it would seem that there is perhaps, well, some double dealing on the part of Mr. Frank Churchill, which rather unpleasant of him, I must say. But other than that, I don't think too much that has gone undiscussed. I must once again thank Lutina and our new dear was it? Dolce, sorry. Oh Lord, I've forgotten that. There it is. Biscuit Rose, that's it. Our dear new Biscuit Rose, for stopping by and rating. I do thank you for entrusting me with your communities. I do hope you have a lovely rest of your evening, all of you, or whatever time of day it is for you. As always, you have my blessing until the beginning and end of my next stream, when you must be here for it once more. Thank you again to the new followers, which I do greatly appreciate, and I hope you all have a lovely day. You're very welcome. Now then, we're raiding out. Plague is live, and so that's who we shall be raiding to. Let that going. I shall certainly do so. I hope you do have a lovely day yourself, Abbe. Yes, we're ready out to Plague, as is quite often our want here. Other than that, what else is there to say? Well, nothing else really, other than that I do hope you all have a lovely time for the rest of your day. I appreciate you all so much for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this story, which we will be continuing, as I have said, next Tuesday and likely finishing the Tuesday after that. With all that said and done and all our business concluded, then I must say only, as always, ta-ra.